Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, where we get the rare opportunity to hear Srila Prabhupada's books every day at length, at least for 45 minutes or an hour, before we begin to appreciate and reflect upon them. This is a unique opportunity, and it has everything to do with the path I've taken in my life, which is just to hear Srila Prabhupada's books and repeat them to others for their edification and for their pleasure. The Sri Caitanya-caritämrta, we're starting that reading. We've been reading for 3 days now. We've reached the 20th verse of the first chapter, which is a very important chapter, glorifying the principle of Guru Tattva, the spiritual master. The Caitanya-caritämrta was our Srila Prabhupada's favorite book on his way over from India on the Jaladuta. He passed through so many difficulties, the weather and heart attacks and so many things, but he lived, he said, on the nectarian sound of the Caitanya-caritämrta. And it was also Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's favorite book, his Life and Soul, and also the perfect scripture. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur once said this about the Caitanya-caritämrta, just after a slight tremor in the earth had caused the Ganga to overflow its banks just a little bit, and then it receded. And after the water receded, he said this: in due course, Mahapralaya, devastating floods, will inundate the entire universe. If you attempt to survive by swimming in that deluge, then do not neglect to take hold of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. Or if you cannot hold all three, then release Bhagavad Gita. If necessary, you may also relinquish Srimad Bhagavatam, but under no circumstances release your hold on Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. For if this one book remains, then the flood can do no actual damage. Because after it is subsided, the message of Shastra can be revived from Sri Caitanya-caritämrta alone, it being the essence of all Shastra. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda, Jai Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda, Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda, Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Reading from Sri Caitanya-caritämrta, Ädi-lilä, Chapter 1, beginning with text 20. In the beginning of this narration, simply by remembering the spiritual master, the devotees of the Lord, and the personality of Godhead, I have invoked their benedictions. 21. Such remembrance destroys all difficulties and very easily enables one to fulfill his own desires. 22. The invocation involves 3 processes: defining the objective, offering benedictions, and offering obeisances. 23. The first 2 verses offer respectful obeisances, generally and specifically, to the Lord who is the object of worship. 24. In the 3rd verse, I indicate the Absolute Truth, who is the ultimate substance. With such a description, one can visualize the Supreme Truth. 25. In the 4th verse, I have invoked the benediction of the Lord upon all the world, praying to Lord Chaitanya for his mercy upon all. 26. In that verse, I have also explained the external reason for Lord Chaitanya's incarnation. But in the 5th and 6th verses, I have explained the prime reason for his advent. In these 6 verses, I have described the truth about Lord Chaitanya, whereas in the next 5, I have described the glory of Lord Nityananda. The next 2 verses describe the truth of Advaita Prabhu, and the following verse describes the Panchatattva, the Lord, his plenary portion, his incarnation, his energies, and his devotees. 29. These 14 verses, therefore, offer auspicious invocations and describe the Supreme Truth. I offer my obeisances unto all my Vaishnava readers as I begin to explain the intricacies of all these verses. So the whole Caitanya-caritämrta is an explanation of the intricacies of these first 14 verses. I request all my Vaishnava readers to read and hear with rapt attention this narration of Sri Krishna Chaitanya as inculcated in the revealed scriptures. Purport. Lord Chaitanya is the Absolute Truth, Krishna himself. This is substantiated by evidence from the authentic spiritual scriptures. Sometimes people accept a man as God on the basis of their whimsical sentiments and without reference to the revealed scriptures. But the author of Caitanya-caritämrta proves all his statements by citing the Shastras. Thus he establishes that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 32. Lord Krishna enjoys by manifesting himself as the spiritual masters, the devotees, the diverse energies, the incarnations, and the plenary portions. They are all 6 in 1. 33. I therefore worship the lotus feet of these 6 diversities of the one truth by invoking their benedictions. And now he comes again, he repeats the first verse. Bande Gurun Isha Bhaktan Isham Ishavatarakan Tat Prakashangs Chatach Chakti Krishna Chaitanya Samgyakam. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the spiritual masters, the devotees of the Lord's incarnations, his plenary portions, his energies, and the primeval Lord himself, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Purport. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has composed this Sanskrit verse for the beginning of his book, and now he will explain it in detail. He offers his respectful obeisances to the 6 principles of the Absolute Truth. Gurun is plural in number because anyone who gives spiritual instructions based on the revealed scriptures is accepted as a spiritual master. Although others give help in showing the way to beginners, the guru who first initiates one with the Mahamantra is to be known as the initiator, and the saints who give instructions for progressive advancement in Krishna consciousness are called instructing spiritual masters. The initiating and instructing spiritual masters are equal and identical manifestations of Krishna, although they have different dealings. Their function is to guide the conditioned souls back home, back to Godhead. Therefore, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami accepted Nityananda Prabhu and the 6 Goswamis in the category of Guru. Isha Bhaktan refers to the devotees of the Lord like Srivas, Sri Srivas, and all other such followers, who are the energy of the Lord and are qualitatively non-different from Him. Ishavatara Khan refers to Acharyas like Advaita Prabhu, who is an avatar of the Lord. Tat Prakashang indicates the direct manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Nityananda Prabhu, and the initiating spiritual master. Tat Shakti refers to the spiritual energies, Shaktis, of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gadadhar, Damodar, and Jagadananda belong to this category of internal energy. The 6 principles are differently manifested, but all equally worshipable. Krishnadas Kaviraj begins by offering his obeisances unto them to teach us the method of worshipping Lord Chaitanya. The external potency of Godhead, called Maya, can never associate with the Lord, just as darkness cannot remain in the presence of light. Yet darkness, being but an illusory and temporary covering of light, has no existence independent of light. Text 35. I first offer my respectful obeisances at the lotus feet of my initiating spiritual master and all my instructing spiritual masters. Purport. Srila Jiva Goswami in his thesis, Bhakti Sandarbha, Anucheta 202, has stated that uncontaminated devotional service is the objective of pure Vaishnavas, and that one has to execute such service in the association of other devotees. By associating with devotees of Lord Krishna, one develops a sense of Krishna consciousness, and thus becomes inclined toward the loving service of the Lord. This is the process of approaching the Supreme Lord by gradual appreciation in devotional service. If one desires unalloyed devotional service, one must associate with devotees of Sri Krishna, for by such association only can a conditioned soul achieve a taste for transcendental love, and thus revive his eternal relationship with Godhead in a specific manifestation and in terms of the specific transcendental mellow, rasa, that one has eternally inherent in him. If one develops love for Krishna by Krishna conscious activities, one can know the Supreme Absolute Truth. But he who tries to understand God simply by logical arguments will not succeed, nor will he get a taste for unalloyed devotion. The secret is that one must submissively listen to those who know perfectly the science of God, and one must begin the mode of service regulated by the preceptor. A devotee already attracted by the name, form, qualities, etc. of the Supreme Lord may be directed to his specific manner of devotional service. He need not waste time in approaching the Lord through logic. The expert spiritual master knows well how to engage his disciples' energy in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, and thus he engages a devotee in a specific devotional service according to his special tendency. A devotee must have only one initiating spiritual master, but because in the scriptures, acceptance of more than one is always forbidden. There is no limit, however, to the number of instructing spiritual masters one may accept. Generally, a spiritual master who constantly instructs a disciple in spiritual science becomes his initiating spiritual master later on. One should always remember that a person who is reluctant to accept a spiritual master and be initiated is sure to be baffled in his endeavor to go back to Godhead. One who is not properly initiated may present himself as a great devotee, but in fact, he is sure to encounter many stumbling blocks on his path of progress towards spiritual realization, with the result that he must continue his term of material existence without relief. Such a helpless person is compared to a ship without a rudder, for such a ship can never reach its destination. It is imperative, therefore, that one accept a spiritual master if he at all desires to gain the favor of the Lord. The service of the spiritual master is essential. If there is no chance to serve the spiritual master directly, a devotee should serve him by remembering his instructions. There is no difference between the spiritual master's instructions and the spiritual master himself. In his absence, therefore, the words of direction should be the pride of the disciple. If one thinks that he is above consulting anyone else, including a spiritual master, he is at once an offender at the lotus feet of the Lord. Such an offender can never go back to Godhead. It is imperative that a serious person accept a bona fide spiritual master in terms of the Shastric injunctions. Sri Jiva Goswami advises that one not accept a spiritual master in terms of hereditary or customary social and ecclesiastical conventions. One should simply try to find a genuinely qualified spiritual master for actual advancement in spiritual understanding. Text 36. My instructing spiritual masters are Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Bhatta Raghunath, Sri Jiva Goswami, Sri Gopala Bhatta Goswami, and Srila Raghunath Das Goswami. (37) These six are my instructing spiritual masters, and therefore I offer millions of respectful obeisances unto their lotus feet. By accepting the six Goswami, purport, by accepting the six Goswamis as his instructing spiritual masters, the author specifically makes it clear that one should not be recognized as a Gaudiya Vaishnava if he is not obedient to them. Text 38. There are innumerable devotees of the Lord. Shut the door. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There are innumerable devotees of the Lord all the way, of whom Srivas Thakur. There are innumerable devotees of the Lord, of whom Srivas Thakur is the foremost. I offer my respectful obeisances thousands of times unto their lotus feet. Text 39. Advaita Acharya is the Lord's partial incarnation, and therefore I offer obeisances millions of times at his lotus feet. Srila Nityananda Ram is the plenary manifestation of the Lord, and I have been initiated by him. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. Text 41. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the internal potencies of the Lord, of whom Sri Gadadhar Prabhu is the foremost. Mm-hmm. 42. Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the personality of Godhead himself, and therefore I offer innumerable prostrations at his lotus feet. 43. Having offered obeisances unto the Lord and all his associates, I shall now try to explain these 6 diversities in one. Purport. There are many unalloyed devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all of whom are considered associates surrounding the Lord. Krishna should be worshipped with his devotees. The diverse principles are therefore the eternal paraphernalia through which the absolute truth can be approached. 44. Although I know that my spiritual master is a servitor of Sri Chaitanya, I know him also as a plenary manifestation of the Lord. Purport. Every living entity is essentially a servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the spiritual master is also his servant. Still, the spiritual master is a direct manifestation of the Lord. With this conviction, a disciple can advance in Krishna consciousness. The spiritual master is non-different from Krishna because he is a manifestation of Krishna. Lord Nityananda, who was Balaram himself, the first direct manifestation or expansion of Krishna, is the original spiritual master. He helps Lord Krishna in his pastimes, and he is a servant of the Lord. Every living entity is eternally a servant of Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Therefore, the spiritual master cannot be other than a servant of Lord Chaitanya. The spiritual master's eternal occupation is to expand the service of the Lord by training disciples in a service attitude. A spiritual master never poses as the Supreme Lord himself. He is considered a representative of the Lord. The revealed scriptures prohibit one's pretending to be God, but a bona fide spiritual master is a most faithful and confidential servant of the Lord, and therefore deserves as much respect as Krishna. 45. According to the deliberate opinion of all revealed scriptures, the spiritual master is non-different from Krishna. Lord Krishna, in the form of the spiritual master, delivers his devotees. Purport. The relationship of a disciple with his spiritual master is as good as his relationship with the Supreme Lord. A spiritual master always represents himself as the humblest servitor of the personality of Godhead, but the disciple must look upon him as the manifested representation of Godhead. 46. One should know the Acharya as myself and never disrespect him in any way. One should not envy him, thinking him an ordinary man, for he is the representative of all the demigods. Purport. This is a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 11:17-27, spoken by Lord Krishna when he was questioned by Uddhava regarding the 4 social and spiritual orders of society. The Lord was specifically instructing how a brahmachari should behave under the care of a spiritual master. A spiritual master is not an enjoyer of facilities offered by his disciples. He is like a parent. Without the attentive service of his parents, a child cannot grow to manhood. Similarly, without the care of the spiritual master, one cannot rise to the plane of transcendental service. The spiritual master is also called Acharya, or a transcendental professor of spiritual science. The Manu Samhita 2.140 explains the duties of an Acharya, describing that a bona fide spiritual master accepts charge of disciples, teaches them the Vedic knowledge with all its intricacies, and gives them their second birth. The ceremony performed to initiate a disciple into the study of spiritual science is called Upaniti, or the function that brings one nearer to the spiritual master. One who cannot be brought nearer to a spiritual master cannot have a sacred thread, and thus he is indicated to be a Shudra. The sacred thread on the body of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya is a symbol of initiation by the spiritual master. It is worth nothing if worn merely to boast of high parentage. The duty of the spiritual master is to initiate a disciple with the sacred thread ceremony, and after this sanskara, or purificatory process, the spiritual master actually begins to teach the disciple about the Vedas. A person born a Shudra is not barred from such spiritual initiation, provided he is approved by the spiritual master, who is duly authorized to award a disciple the right to be a Brahmana if he finds him perfectly qualified. In the Vayu Purana, an Acharya is defined as one who knows the import of all Vedic literatures, abides by their rules and regulations, and teaches his disciples to act in the same way. Only out of his immense compassion does the personality of Godhead reveal himself as the spiritual master. Therefore, in the dealings of an Acharya, there are no activities but those of transcendental, loving service to the Lord. He is the Supreme Personality of Servitor Godhead. It is worthwhile to take shelter of such a steady devotee, who is called Ashraya Vigraha, or the manifestation or form of the Lord, of whom one must take shelter. If one poses himself as an Acharya, but does not have an attitude of servitorship to the Lord, he must be considered an offender. And this offensive attitude disqualifies him from being an Acharya. The bona fide spiritual master always engages in unalloyed devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By this test, he is known to be a direct manifestation of the Lord and a genuine representative of Sri Nityananda Prabhu. Such a spiritual master is known as Acharya Dev. Influenced by an envious temperament and dissatisfied because of an attitude of sense gratification, mundaners criticize a real Acharya. In fact, however, a bona fide Acharya is non-different from the personality of Godhead, and therefore to envy such an Acharya is to envy the personality of Godhead himself. This will produce an effect subversive of transcendental realization. As mentioned previously, a disciple should always respect the spiritual master as a manifestation of Sri Krishna, but at the same time, one should always remember that a spiritual master is never authorized to imitate the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. False spiritual masters pose themselves as identical with Sri Krishna in every respect, to exploit the sentiments of their disciples. But such impersonalists can only mislead their disciples, for their ultimate aim is to become one with the Lord. This is against the principles of the devotional cult. The real Vedic philosophy is Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, which establishes everything to be simultaneously one with and different from the personality of Godhead. Srila Raghunath Das Goswami confirms that this is the real position of a bona fide spiritual master, and says that one should always think of the spiritual master in terms of his intimate relationship with Mukunda, Sri Krishna. Srila Jiva Goswami, in his Bhakti Sandarbha 213, has clearly explained that a pure devotee's observation of the spiritual master and Lord Shiva as being one with the personality of Godhead exists in terms of their being very dear to the Lord, not identical with him in all respects. Following in the footsteps of Srila Raghunath Das Goswami and Srila Jiva Goswami, later acharyas like Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur have confirmed the same truths. In his prayers to the spiritual master, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur confirms that all the revealed scriptures accept the spiritual master to be identical with the personality of Godhead because he is a very dear and confidential servitor of the Lord. Gaudiya Vaishnavas therefore worship Srila Gurudev, the spiritual master, in the light of his being the servitor of the personality of Godhead. In all the ancient literatures of devotional service, and in the more recent songs of Srila Narottam Das Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and other unalloyed Vaishnavas, the spiritual master is always considered either one of the confidential associates of Srimati Radharani or a manifested representation of Srila Nityananda Prabhu. Text 47. One should know the instructing spiritual master to be the personality of Godhead Krishna. One should know the instructing spiritual master to be the personality of Krishna. Lord Krishna manifests himself as the super soul and as the greatest devotee of the Lord. Purport. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami states that the instructing spiritual master is a bona fide representative of Krishna. Sri Krishna himself teaches us as the instructing spiritual master from within and without. From within, he teaches as Paramatma, our constant companion, and from without, he teaches from the Bhagavad Gita as the instructing spiritual master. There are two kinds of instructing spiritual masters. One is the liberated person, fully absorbed in meditation and devotional service, and the other is he who invokes the disciple's spiritual consciousness by means of relevant instructions. Thus, the instructions in the science of devotion are differentiated in terms of the objective and subjective ways of understanding. The Acharya, in the true sense of the term, who is authorized to deliver Krishna, enriches the disciple with full spiritual knowledge and thus awakens him to the activities of devotional service. When learning from the self-realized spiritual master, one actually engages himself in the service of Lord Vishnu. Functional devotional service begins. The procedures of this devotional service, I'll read that again. When, by learning from the self-realized spiritual master, one actually engages himself in the service of Lord Vishnu, functional devotional service begins. The procedures of this devotional service are known as abhideya, or actions one is duty-bound to perform. Our only shelter is the Supreme Lord, and one who teaches how to approach Krishna is the functioning form of the personality of Godhead. There is no difference between the shelter-giving Supreme Lord and the initiating and instructing spiritual masters. If one foolishly discriminates between them, he commits an offense in the discharge of devotional service. Srila Sanatana Goswami is the ideal spiritual master, for he delivers one the shelter of the lotus feet of Madan Mohan. Even though one may be unable to travel on the field of Vrindavan due to forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can get an adequate opportunity to stay in Vrindavan and derive all spiritual benefits by the mercy of Sanatana Goswami. Sri Govindaji acts exactly like the Shiksha Guru, instructing spiritual master, by teaching Arjuna the Bhagavad Gita. He is the original preceptor, for he gives us instructions and an opportunity to serve him. The initiating spiritual master is a personal manifestation of Srila Madan Mohan Vigraha, whereas the instructing spiritual master is a personal representative of Srila Govindadev Vigraha. Both of these deities are worshipped at Vrindavan. Srila Gopinath is the ultimate attraction in spiritual realization. Text 48. O my Lord, transcendental poets and experts in spiritual science could not fully express their indebtedness to you, even if they were endowed with the prolonged lifetime of Brahma. For you appear in two features, externally as the Acharya, and internally as the Super-Soul, to deliver the embodied living being by directing him how to come to you. So I'd like to inject just one short thought here. I like to read straight, but this is a very important point. That is that the verses, as I said in the beginning, of different scriptures are placed in the actual verses of the Caitanya-caritämrta, and they're woven together to make, to connect all the dots of all the essence of all the revealed scriptures to show how they come to the same conclusion: pure devotional service unto Krishna. And that is an important part of what makes the Caitanya-caritämrta the perfect scripture. And it's also why Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, if you can only have one scripture to hold on to this one, because it connects all the other scriptures together in realization. Purport. This verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 11:29-6 was spoken by Sri Uddhava after he heard from Sri Krishna all the necessary instructions about yoga. Text 49. Tesham satati yuktanam. Here we go. This is Bhagavad Gita. So we go from 11th canto of Bhagavatam to Bhagavad Gita in 2 verses. Tesham satati yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Purport. This verse of the Bhagavad Gita 10.10 clearly states how Govindadev instructs his bona fide devotee. The Lord declares that by enlightenment in theistic knowledge, he awards attachment for him to those who constantly engage in his transcendental loving service. This awakening of divine consciousness enthralls a devotee, who thus relishes his eternal transcendental mellow. Such an awakening is awarded only to those convinced by devotional service about the transcendental nature of the personality of Godhead. They know that the Supreme Truth the all-spiritual and all-powerful person, is one without a second, and has fully transcendental senses. He is the fountainhead of all emanations. Such pure devotees, always merged in knowledge of Krishna and absorbed in Krishna consciousness, exchange thoughts and realizations as great scientists exchange their views and discuss the results of their research in scientific academies. Such exchanges of thoughts in regard to Krishna give pleasure to the Lord, who therefore favors such devotees with all enlightenment. Text 50. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Swayam Bhagavan, taught Brahma and made him self-realized. Purport. The English maxim that God helps those who help themselves is also applicable in the transcendental realm. There are many instances in the revealed scriptures of the personality of Godheads acting as the spiritual master from within. The personality of Godhead was the spiritual master who instructed Brahma, the original living being in the cosmic creation. When Brahma was first created, he could not apply his creative energy to arrange the cosmic situation. At first there was only sound, vibrating the word tapa, which indicates the acceptance of hardships for spiritual realization. Refraining from sensual enjoyment, one should voluntarily accept all sorts of difficulties for spiritual realization. This is called tapasya. An enjoyer of the senses can never realize God, godliness, or the science of theistic knowledge. Thus, when Brahma, initiated by Sri Krishna by the sound vibration tapa, engaged himself in acts of austerity by the pleasure of Vishnu, he was able to visualize the spiritual world. He was able to visualize the transcendental world, Sri Vaikuntha, through transcendental realization. Modern science can communicate using material discoveries such as radio, television, and computers, but the science invoked by the austerities of Sri Brahma, the original father of mankind, was still more subtle. In time, material scientists may also know how we can communicate with the Vaikuntha world. Lord Brahma inquired about the potency of the Supreme Lord, and the personality of Godhead answered his inquiry in the following 6 consecutive statements. These instructions, which are reproduced from Srimad Bhagavatam 2:9, 31 through 36, were imparted by the personality of Godhead acting as the spiritual master. So now we come to the chatur, the 4 seed verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. Only 50 verses into the Caitanya-caritämrta, we've already come to the 4 seed verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Jnanam paramaguyam me yad vijnana samanvitam sa rahasyam tadangam cha grihana gatitam maya. This is just before the verses. Please hear attentively what I shall speak to you, for transcendental knowledge about me is not only scientific, but also full of mysteries. Purport. Transcendental knowledge of Sri Krishna is deeper than the impersonal knowledge of Brahman, for it includes knowledge of not only his form and personality, but also everything else related to him. There is nothing in existence not related to Sri Krishna. In a sense, there is nothing but Sri Krishna, and yet nothing is Sri Krishna save and except his primeval personality. This knowledge constitutes a complete transcendental science, and Vishnu wanted to give Brahmaji full knowledge about that science. The mystery of this knowledge culminates in personal attachment to the Lord, with a resulting effect of detachment from anything non-Krishna. There are 9 alternative transcendental means of attaining this stage: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, worshipping, praying, assisting, fraternizing with the Lord, and sacrificing everything for Him. These are different parts of the same devotional service, which is full of transcendental mystery. The Lord said to Brahma that since he was pleased with him, by his grace, the mystery was being revealed. Yavan aham yata bhavo yad rupa gunakarmakaha tataiva tattva vijnanam astu te madanugrahat. By my causeless mercy, be enlightened in truth about my personality, manifestations, qualities, and pastimes. Purport. The transcendental personal forms of the Lord are a mystery, and the symptoms of these forms, which are absolutely different from anything made of mundane elements, are also mysterious. The innumerable forms of the Lord, such as Shyamasundar, Narayana, Rama, and Gaurasundar, the colors of these forms, white, red, yellow, cloud-like Shyama, and others, his qualities as the responsive personality of Godhead to pure devotees, and as impersonal Brahman to dry speculators, his uncommon activities like lifting Govardhan Hill, marrying more than 16,000 queens at Dwarka, and entering the rasa dance with the damsels of Braja, expanding himself in as many forms as there were damsels in the dance. These and innumerable other uncommon acts and attributes are all mysteries, one aspect of which is presented in the scientific knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, which is read and adored all over the world by all classes of scholars, with as many interpretations as there are empiric philosophers. The truth of these mysteries was revealed to Brahma by the descending process, without the help of the ascending one. The Lord's mercy descends to a devotee like Brahma, and through Brahma to Narada, from Narada to Vyas, from Vyasadeva to Shukadev, and so on in the bona fide chain of disciplic succession. We cannot discover the mysteries of the Lord by our mundane endeavors. They are only revealed by His grace to the proper devotees. These mysteries are gradually disclosed to the various grades of devotees in proportion to the gradual development of their service attitude. In other words, impersonalists who depend on the strength of their poor fund of knowledge and morbid speculative habits, without submission and service in the forms of hearing, chanting, and the others mentioned above, cannot penetrate to the mysterious region of transcendence, where the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Truth, is a transcendental person, free from all tinges of material elements. Discovering the mystery of the Lord eliminates the impersonal feature realized by common spiritualists, who are merely trying to enter the spiritual region from the mundane platform. And the next 4 verses, and very substantial purports, are the 4 seed verses of the Bhagavatam, Chaturshloki Bhagavatam. So I'll stop here. I don't want to stop in the middle of these other 4 verses. We'll do those tomorrow. but we have the verses introducing them, and you're welcome to read them again sometime between now and tomorrow when we'll read the Chaturshloki Bhagavatam. So with that, I'll end the reading for tonight. It's almost an hour, almost 8 o'clock. And there's lots and lots of nectarian points we just heard. If any one of them stuck out in your mind while you were hearing, please feel free to reflect upon them if you'd like, or have a discussion among us if you like, or inquire about them if you like, whatever. Hare Krishna. Okay. Somebody out in cyberspace land has got something to say here.
It's from Pranahari Das.
From Pranahari. Haribol Pranahari.
He says, Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances.
Jai, mine to you, glories to Prabhupada.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada. This was a simple but great explanation of Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. In a sense, there is nothing but Sri Krishna, and yet nothing is Sri Krishna, save and except his primeval personality.
There you go. Yeah. Because everything emanates from Krishna. Nothing can come into existence without having come from Krishna, and therefore everything in that sense is Krishna. But at the same time, everything is not. Prabhupada always gave this clear, simple example of the sun and the sunshine, or fire and heat and light. The total sum of those things, the heat, the fire, the heat, and the light, are one thing, fire. But even though it's one thing, we can discuss the heat, the light, and the fire as separate entities at the same time. But you'll never see a fire without light or heat. And you'll never see heat without the fire, etc., etc. It's so simple. Srila Prabhupada broke down these very deep philosophical points with the simplest examples, always, and he kept repeating them again and again, just to convince us that it was enough. I remember when I stayed in London for almost 7 years, between 6 and 7 years, and I conducted a question and answer session upstairs every day from about 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon until whenever it was, and there was no one left to talk to. And during that time, I noticed that the doubts that people have can be broken down into certain categories, and they in essence they end up being not that many doubts, you know. And if you learn these arguments that Prabhupada gave, like Pranahari is pointing out, a very simple explanation of what Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva is, and the analogy is very powerful. Whenever you're trying to convince somebody of anything, if you use timely and powerful analogies, that it makes it easier for people to understand. And I just kept, once I found the one that worked, I just kept using it for the same question, and that was it, and it worked. Therefore Prabhupada said, just learn these books and repeat them in your own words, and you'll become a perfect preacher. But we start to make things up because you want to be seen as something special or somebody special, and you get a new analogy that no one's ever heard before, and they can go, ooh, ah, to you, then you lose the potency completely. What else out there? What else you got for us? We're sitting here locked down, isolated. We need the association of the Vaishnavas. Go on. Give it to us. okay, maybe it was just so good that everybody's just swooning in ecstasy. Something else. Danitai, Haribo, Haribo.
He says, Respected Srila Guru Maharaj, please accept my obeisances. The purport to text 34 states that darkness has no existence independent of light. How is it that darkness depends on light? Please enlighten my darkness.
Well, there can't be darkness without light. If you stand facing the sun, there is no darkness to you. And when you turn your back on the sun, then you're automatically in your own shadow. So when you turn your back to the sun, to light, automatically there's darkness. And as long as you're facing the sun, there is no darkness. Therefore, darkness depends on the sun. The darkness is absence of light.
From Rati Manjari.
Yes, Rati.
She says, Dear Guru Maharaj,
took you long enough.
Please accept my humble obeisances.
You must have been making notes or something.
Thank you for pointing our attention how the Sri Caitanya-caritämrta is presenting all these important verses and connecting them in one scripture.
Yes. Because it's the preaching scripture. Caitanya-caritämrta is the scripture that teaches us how to preach the science of devotional service perfectly. And Caitanya-caritämrta happened, just 500 years ago. And therefore the examples and the personalities and the places, they're all, within recorded history, and we can relate easier to them. These are all reasons why, what to speak of the fact that the basic teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the perfect teachings, are there. Namo Mahavaranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Goratwijaya Namaha. He's the most munificent form of Krishna, because he gives what nobody gave, even Krishna, freely, so freely, love of Krishna. That's Lord Chaitanya. Yes.
Pranahari writes more.
Hey, Pranahari, you're in the game. Get it? Come on, let's go.
He says, Prabhupada also wrote in the last purport we heard, quote, We cannot discover the mysteries of the Lord by our mundane endeavors. They are only revealed by His grace to the proper devotees.
Yes.
I have been meditating on this more and more. We heard a lecture from Srila Prabhupada this morning where he quoted the verse, Mahajano Yenagata Sapanta. Dry arguments are inconclusive. A great personality whose opinion does not differ from others is not considered a great sage. Simply by studying the Vedas, which are variegated, one cannot come to the right path by which religious principles are understood. The solid truth of religious principles is hidden in the heart of an unadulterated, self-realized person. Consequently, as the Shastras confirm, one should accept whatever progressive path the Mahajans advocate.
Yes.
Really important point about not speculating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. I have a letter on a partly composed letter on my computer to a devotee who's speculating. I get to now use your realization. Thank you very much.
Rati Manjari says, I had never really thought about this scripture in this light. but now I understand how rich this makes the CC.
Yes, absolutely. Therefore Prabhupada stopped, translating, commenting on the Bhagavatam in the middle to make sure that we got the whole Caitanya-caritämrta. It's that important.
Something from Daityari Haridas.
Daityari? Hare Krishna Daityari Haridas.
He says, Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Haribo.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity to go through the CC with you. I just wanted to ask, on the point that by associating with devotees we develop a sense of Krishna consciousness and become inclined toward the loving service of the Lord and gradually come nearer to Krishna. I was just wondering in what ways can we most effectively take advantage of devotee association and have our hearts quickly affected by the attitudes of advanced devotees, instead of just going through the mechanics of doing the externals of devotional service in the proximity of devotees, rather than actually performing devotional service in
the thing is, the association of the devotees, just as hearing the Bhagavatam in the association of the devotees, purifies one and gradually brings into the heart the original consciousness. Krishna consciousness is the original consciousness. It's there in the heart already. And it's not that, you can figure out, how to get it out. We're conditioned by the material nature, and it's much more powerful than we are. But what we have to do, the process of association with the devotees is just that. It's if you associate with devotees and you're always talking about politics and the latest jokes that you heard on the internet or whatever, that's not association with the devotees. We just heard it in the 49th verse of this chapter. Is it? Yeah, 49th verse. It talked about how devotees relish, as scientists relish talking about their different discoveries in academic, settings. The devotees relish discussing Krishna consciousness together. Machjita madgata prana, bodhiyanta parasparam, katayantas chamam nityam, tushanticha, ramanticha. So associating with the devotees means to be in association with the devotees who are always talking about Krishna and always reminding us of Krishna. And by that process, the Krishna consciousness, by that touch, it comes out. Just like when you get close to fire, as you get closer to fire, you get warmer and warmer and warmer. That's Sangha. That's the principle of Sangha. So when you associate with the devotees, it's not that, you have to serve, you have to be affectionate with the devotees, but the actual association with the devotees itself, in all its aspects and all the facets of association, have that effect by association. It's not that you can calculate, okay, now today I'm going to do this and this and this with this person, and then he's going to do that and that with the person, and then Krishna consciousness is going to come springing out, or raining from the sky. It's not like that. It's already there, and it just has to be awakened by being in contact with devotees in devotional service, by hearing and chanting, by worshiping the deities with the devotees, by hearing, especially by hearing the scriptures, and serving and discussing how you're going to increase the spreading of Krishna consciousness. These are the activities of advanced devotees. So if we associate with devotees that are more advanced than us, then we will automatically develop the depth of our thinking. All the different qualities that come out, the natural affection after a devotional service, it will all come out. Our desire to spread Krishna consciousness, it will come out. So it's not so much of what can I do in order to chant your rounds without offense, worship the deities. All these activities will help us, but they are done in the association of the devotees. Because no one else gets together every day and chants in front of the deities except for devotees. So Prabhupada used the word automatic. It doesn't mean that it's some kind of automatic thing. If you maintain offenses against devotees and sit, in the same room, but kind of like, what's the word? Put yourself into solitary confinement by your false ego and just are barricaded into your false ego so that nobody can talk to you and nobody can exchange with you, because what's in your heart isn't Krishna conscious, then it's not that it's automatic. You have to have the right consciousness. You have to be receptive. You have to be surrendered. The whole principle is surrender. Daivyesha gunamayi, mama maya duratyaya, mame vajye prapadyante, maya metam tarantite. The Maya modes of nature, Krishna's modes, they're very difficult. Duratyaya, they're impossible to overcome. But mame vajye prapadyante, those who surrender unto Krishna, they can very easily cross over Maya. So what you can do is surrender to the association of the devotees. Cultivate submissiveness. Submissiveness, it's going to come. Just a few more verses. Now we're on 51. Verse 55, the purport. Prabhupada will analyze how submissiveness, the one quality of submissiveness, is what brings us closer and closer and eventually allows us to be with Krishna face to face, just as we are face to face with another friend or another person. That's all I have to say about that.
Rati Manjari has something else. She says, tonight we heard a lot about the different spiritual masters and how to view them. I find this section always interesting and mystical. There are so many questions which come up in me, too many to ask in one reading. If you permit me, I would like to ask this one. We are told not to be envious of the spiritual master. Due to my misfortune and conditioning, I have sometimes found myself to be envious of my spiritual master, Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami. Clearly this has not worked in my advantage. Could you please elaborate on how to deal with this?
Envy means that you want to be better than the other person. So you have to cultivate the knowledge and the understanding and the perception that you're not superior or better than your spiritual master. Of course, in your case, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, look what he did. It's pretty easy to see how you're not superior to him, isn't it? And then, in his absence, which is special mercy, by the way, when the spiritual master leaves, in a sense, we're heartbroken, we're crestfallen, but at the same time, it gives us an opportunity to remember the instructions of the spiritual master and apply them. And when we do that, we please him, acting in a way that pleases the spiritual master is the way to overcome any feelings of envy or competition that may be there in the heart with your spiritual master. That's the essence of it. There's so many details. I mean, you could write books, volumes of books. As a matter of fact, the Caitanya-caritämrta is about this. The whole book is about this, actually, especially when we get to the Ädi-lilä and we read about the actual relationships of the devotees between Lord Chaitanya and his devotees and their relationships with one another. And then you learn so many things about how to be a devotee and how to want to be a devotee, because by hearing these things, you should want to be like that. You know, you should not want to figure out how you can supplant the spiritual master or compete with the spiritual master. I mean, there's all kinds of people who go out of the movement and then try to make another movement with themselves in the center. You know, just cultivate your relationship with Srila Prabhupada properly as the founder Acharya of this movement and your Diksha Guru, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, as his most intimate servant. I mean, who did he select? The last year of his life, when he needed somebody to take care of him, who did he trust? Who did he select? He selected Tamal Krishna Maharaj out of all his disciples. So if you feel, I don't know, if you feel jealous or something like that, like why couldn't I be selected to do that or something like that, then that's not very good. So you have to give up that, you know, just like it does take some effort on our part. When Prabhupada uses the word automatically, it's not that it happens automatically without any effort from our part. It takes an effort on our part to give up those mentalities and those feelings and perceptions, you know, that are not correct. And the holy name will purify them, sure. But we also, because time is time, and time never goes away. If you chant periodically or intermittently or serve sometimes and serve and not others, then time will gradually cause you to forget. But if you keep hearing and chanting and serving and cultivating the proper mentality by rejecting the improper mentality, that's why in Ishopanishad it says that one must understand, you know, what the to-dos and not to-dos, both at the same time, in order to be able to know how to approach the spiritual master and Krishna. Here, Caitanya-caritämrta, you know, Krishnadas Kaviraj is explaining how what the relationship is to the spiritual master and the disciple. We have to embrace that. We have to accept it because it's coming from such exalted personality. So all these things combined together are the wherefores and how what to do and what not to do. And it takes practice. It takes decades and decades of practice to become fixed so that we never become influenced by time. We'll all become influenced by time. We all have to leave the bodies. The bodies are get old. Look at, I'm now 74 almost. I can't hardly walk. But that doesn't mean that I'm the body. It doesn't mean that that has to affect me. So we have to practice being not affected by keeping our devotional service going every day without stoppage. That's it. That will give us the right mentality. It will give us the right taste, and then the association of our spiritual master and Diksha and Shiksha gurus will elevate us. And then it's up to us to stay there. It's not that the spiritual master does things for us. It's up to us to accept and reject those things that are favorable and not favorable, and to perceive the presence of the spiritual master through the instructions. Anything else?
Rati Manjari says, thank you for commenting on this sensitive point. I have so much purification to go through still.
Hare Krishna.
And Daitari Haridas.
Rati, I think you're doing great. That's my reciprocation for you. I think you're doing great. You love to chant Hare Krishna. You take people out, and even if no one will go out with you, you go out by yourself and chant Hare Krishna in the streets. Then you relish it. That's not an ordinary thing. And even if it's mixed with your desire to be a star, it's the right way to be a star. Hare Krishna. Dalantai?
Yeah. He says, although I can't find the exact reference, we read tonight that materialistic scientists may eventually find ways to communicate with the Vaikuntha worlds. Would you mind to explain more on this?
Poetic license. It's a poetic way of saying they'll never do it. It's a rhetorical statement. You cannot come to the spiritual world through a material process. That's what Prabhupada meant. Trying to get a little credit so that the reader will be more receptive, knowing how attached everybody is to the authority of the scientists. But if you take that one, you have to. This is why it's so important to read all the books over and over and over again. So then you can contextualize statements like this with the hundreds and thousands of statements where Prabhupada, ridicules the scientists as never being able to do that. And then you'll understand his sarcasm and his sense of humor. And the closer you get to Prabhupada, the better you'll understand just what a beautiful personality he was, and how many tools he had to bring out the right thing in us, to reveal the right thing to us. That's about as far as I can go with it.
He says, thank you, Sri the Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Okay, it's 20 after 8. We're over our quota. Thank you so much, everyone, and it is lovely to be with you. And like somebody said, to go through the Caitanya-caritämrta together, every single word. It's going to be a lovely experience. We're just getting started. Caitanya-caritämrta ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. See you tomorrow, Sunday, right here in the Haven, next to the English Channel, Hive, live studios. Hare Krishna.